Well, Renard, another episode. I am so excited for today's episode. Part of the reason is I am hopped up on energy drinks. So that is always helpful, but that should not distract away from our guest today. So, Renard, why don't you introduce our guest?
Oh, man, I'm excited for this one. We have a New Orleans native, internationally known, a founder and managing partner of Protégé Search, Rory Verrett. Rory, thank you so much for being here today. We are so happy to have you.
Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh man, we want to get right into it. We've been excited, like I said earlier before we got on. Told the fiance, hey, who we gonna have on? She was excited. And, we definitely want to start off. If you could you give our listeners your origin story for the most part? Can you give us the background about Rory?
Wow, that's a great question. I've never been asked to go that far back, but we'll start. From New Orleans, went to college and law school, and then wanted a career in politics. Ran for office in New Orleans, lost, very humbling, as the geeky student body president and student government leader since second grade. I don't know why you need a vice president of the Arbor Club, but I was the vice president of the Arbor Club in third grade. Who knew you need a vice president? And after that, I went into the entrepreneurial field as a .com, that's what it's called, .com founder in 2000. Did that for 5 years. Sent my resume to an executive search firm, like a lot of people do, looking for my next role. And the search firm said, "We think you'd be a great executive recruiter." And I thought, that's interesting. That's kind of silly. Let's get back to this VP of Government Affairs job. I want to get back into private sector lobbying. And they persisted a bit. I took a test. They came back and said, "This is the highest score we've ever seen in the history of the firm in 50 years. And I said, "I don't even know what you all do. What are you talking about?" It's like, "Well, you can't really fake this test." It was a pivotal moment in my career. I was getting married, and I said, what the heck? I don't want to practice law. I don't want to be in politics. Let me try this executive recruiting thing, and I'll recruit lawyers and lobbyists. They say that the executive search profession chooses you, that you don't choose it. Nobody is 5 years old saying, "I want to be a headhunter." But I took to it, and I was at two big search firms. I wound up being the National Football League's executive recruiter. Then they recruited me to be the head of talent management, where I led our leadership development program and succession planning and coached a lot of the executives, coached the coaches as they prepared for their head coaching interviews. And then I went to a public affairs firm after that as a partner and started a podcast on the side called Protégé. That was going to be me talking to people about career advice. I'm the host mentor. The person I'm interviewing like this is the guest mentor, and the listener is the protege. I wanted to get a media deal, but that never happened. But companies called me to do executive recruiting. And I said, "No, I don't do that. That's silly. I want to be on cable. I want a Sirius satellite radio show." They kept calling. So I started a firm called Protégé Search, which is an executive search firm. And I've been doing that for 9 years.
Man, that's great. That's great. That's an interesting turn. Like it was something you didn't plan on doing, but you wind up being an executive recruiter, and now Protege Search. You've what probably found executives for almost every big company around for the past couple of years. If you could just tell us, why did you decide to start your own firm in the first place, and what do you look for in that future leader for a great business?
I started the firm because I just thought there was a need to do executive search differently. Executive search is a big business, a multi-billion-dollar global business. And when you're at the big firms, it can feel, as a practitioner and the client, which is a company or organization, and the candidates, it can start to feel transactional. You know, you've got to do 10 to 15 searches a year. You're plowing through it. You're putting your head down. You're going through resumes and interviews all day. And I thought to myself, I want to do this in a way that is a little more thoughtful, that I want to do fewer searches. I don't want to feel frazzled all the time. I was doing 150,000 flight miles a year. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be global, and I wanted to really give clients an advisory business on top of the recruiting business, not to just line up candidates, but to tell you, this is why this person is right. This is the trajectory of their career. This is the inflection point in your organization. This is why this moment is right for both of you. And that required a different ethos. So we've worked with primarily mission-driven organizations and companies. So that includes Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, Princess Paisley Park, the Westminster Kennel Club, Twilio, Peloton, San Francisco Giants. Locally in New Orleans, we recruited the executive director for Nokia. We have done work abroad with ERM, the world's largest sustainability consulting firm. We have a client in Berlin that High Snobiety, which is a hipster fashion magazine. So this ethos works globally. And we also offer executive coaching both to executives that are in companies and executives that are in transition looking to pivot. So your last question about what do we look for? It's specific to the role that we're recruiting for. The head of HR at Patagonia is different than the head of communications at Westminster Kennel, is different than the president of the Seattle Mariners baseball team. What I try to find, my sort of, I don't know if it's my special sauce, but it's a unique approach I take to these evaluations, is I try to find out when the person felt that they were walking in their purpose and really felt what I call the authentic confidence that they have. Not that they're a great executive or they won some prizes, because this mentality, this feeling you have in your career can happen as early as college, sometimes even high school. I find that executives that have that self-awareness of what their strengths are, that they can plot themselves in opportunities that will match what they're doing. I liken it to a music star. They're aware that, hey, I'm Prince. I probably shouldn't play at a honky-tonk bar in Nashville. I'm probably better playing at live music venues that are large scale on a global basis, that allow me to jump off the piano and play guitar and sing. And I need a certain kind of venue. I think that executives sometimes, frankly, they choose wrong because they don't know the venue they're supposed to play in. They pick their Taylor Swift and they pick the hip hop bar, and that's probably not where they should be.
Oh man, I always wanted to know, from that, you have your normal corporate recruiter, but like you say, then there's executive search. That's a total difference between the two. If you could just for our listeners, so they can understand, this is especially for your people who are just starting out in their career, the senior managers who want to get to an executive level, for them to understand what that major difference is.
Great distinction and very important to highlight. When you are in the early part of your career until middle management, you're likely going to be applying for jobs, or a recruiter will reach out to you from the company, or a contingency firm will help you. A contingency firm is named because they may take your resume and shop you around as your agent, as the agent. And if they place you, they get a fee. So their fee is contingent on the company hiring you. If you're looking for, as we did, the CFO of KFC, they're not going to put an ad up to find the CFO of KFC. They are looking for a passively interested executive who is a world-class finance leader, who is not trying to find a job. They're putting their head down doing great work. They may be at another franchise corporation. They may be at another retail corporation. They may be at McKinsey or Bain or Boston Consulting Group. And somebody has to approach them and say, hey, Amir, would you be interested in an opportunity that gave you a more global footprint to the finance innovation you're doing at your company? I'd be interested in that. Let's talk, let's meet, let's have a Zoom, let's have a coffee if it's in person, and let me learn about you. You can learn about the role. So it becomes this cultivation. And the business model is very different. It's called retained executive search. The company is my client. They're paying me a retainer to run a recruiting process, which is why I always tell executives, as I did erroneously, do not reach out to an executive search firm to look for your job. That's like going to the coffee plant and asking somebody, can I get a Folgers cup of coffee? Can I get a cappuccino? You're at the Folgers plant. They do a B2B model. They're not selling you the cappuccino retail. And so working with an executive search firm is very helpful to get a lot of other information. You can get great compensation information about what roles pay in your field. You can learn about what else you can do in your career, but it's very limited in terms of it being able to place you in your next job. I celebrate 20 years in executive search. I have placed 3 people who were looking for jobs, who called me, who also matched the client's need. The client liked them. They were okay to relocate. They were in the compensation range, and they wind up taking a job. 3 people among the hundreds of searches I've done.
That is a very, very unique lens that you bring to recruiting, Rory. And I learned something just in hearing you speak. You know, I think the distinction you drew for folks who are aspiring to be leaders or leaders in organizations in the capacity of a chief financial officer or CEO or CEO and so on. What are some of the things that you would say, you know, assuming somebody knows where they want to go? They know that I need to be in this venue, not hip hop, but it's R&B, for example, right? But I don't necessarily have the right muscles built up yet. How would you direct them so that they can be ready? So when you tap on their shoulder, this is their venue. They're ready to show up, you know, as a star.
A couple of things. One is to disrupt your thinking that the only value or equity at your job is a promotion and more money. I used to say this at the NFL to our NFL lead directors all the time. You guys are outside my door asking for a promotion. That's actually not the right thing to ask. What you really want is a stretch assignment. The research shows that you accelerate your effectiveness as an executive by learning on the job. You can only learn on the job if your job expands. If you're doing the same job over and over again, and you're very effective at that, you may not ever have your role expanding. You may be doing the same controller job year in, year out, year in, year out. You have to go to your boss or go to your mentor or go to people in the organization and say, I'd like to learn how to do this. Can I work on a project, a task force? You got to volunteer and raise your hand. You have to do that. So when you do that, you wind up getting extra credentials. You get extra experience. Your resume starts to look, more expansive. And you can interview for jobs where they're asking, have you done this? So if you interview for a job and let's just say it requires skills and competencies A, B, C, and D, and you've only done A and B for 15 years, and you just learned how to do C, but now you've got kind of a newish version of C. When someone like me interviews you and I say, well, the client is looking for these leadership competencies, A, B, C, and D. I see that you have A and B. What about C and D? Here's your answer. I just went through a stretch assignment over the last 2 years where I did an expat assignment in Singapore with our company, and I learned how to do C. I don't have experience in D, and I'm interested in learning more about it. Now, what am I to conclude and evaluate from that? 1, you've done A and B really well, and 2, you bridged the learning curve to get that third competency. So I'm going to take a gamble that you can learn and bridge a learning curve on that fourth competency. So now, just because you got the stretch assignment, you almost get 2 credits for C and D. Whereas 2 years ago, you were doing the controller function the same way you'd done it for the last 15 years. You're not growing. Now, not only have you grown by about a third in your leadership capability, you're going to get credit that you could learn even more. And so if you can explain that in your interview, which is the last part, if you can narrate that in your interview, you're going to be completely different than you would have been even 2 years ago when you couldn't say that, didn't know how to say it, and didn't have anything to say.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, Rory, I just thought of a label that I think you are, and with all due respect, super mentor. I think you're a super mentor in the way you
I
describe
need to
that.
shave this gray off my chin. That's what you're saying. That's a nice way of calling me old, man.
Yeah. But on the topic of mentorship, because I do mentorship for my teams, and I talk to them and I ask them, and some of them will approach me within the organization to say, hey Amir, I see you're doing all of these things outside of work. I see you doing these things inside of work. Help me get to level A, whatever that level might be for them. So as I think about this topic of mentorship, and I see somebody like you as a super mentor, how would you develop super mentors in organizations? It's one thing to be the leader and projecting the vision and having people follow you. How would you build that muscle within an organization to say, now you've got super Rorys running around and building all this great leadership skill within a company?
Great question. I completely revitalized the mentor protege program at the NFL, which, like a lot of mentor protege programs, have become sort of just a bit rote. You signed up, you got your mentor, your mentee, you talked to them a couple of times, had coffee, nothing had happened, and it had kind of fallen out of favor. So we said, let's borrow from other matchmaking scenarios. And I studied a lot of online dating. To be honest with you, I studied online dating about, like, what does eHarmony do? And they had an algorithm to say, we're going to match this person with we think, you liking poetry and foreign film and foreign travel is going to match up with this person that likes basket weaving and, hunting elk. I don't know. They figured out the algorithm. So I said, what if we just get more information about mentors, more information about the young people, the proteges, and did a match? Because what happens is most mentors are hedging their bets. They know that mentoring is an investment of time. They have a scarcity of time. They are going to mentor the people that they believe are going to turn out to be leaders because they want to expand their influence in the organization. And if they have 3 people that are directors that become SVPs in 10 years, they not only seem like some super mentor or some leadership god, but they have more influence in the organization. So they're not going to mentor people they don't think are going to make it. Well, that's not necessarily how you should approach it. How you should approach it as a mentor is, number one, think about the impact you can make on the person. How much distance can you help them travel in their career? How much can you help them make up or cure some defects in their background? We had an example of the CFO who mentored a woman who was in club business development, and they had a great affinity for a certain ball club. They thought the same way. They interacted with the clubs a certain way, and they had never really met each other. They created this amazing professional relationship. She got recruited to work in finance, and the rest is history. So we had a bunch of these scenarios that happen because we changed the mentality of, don't just take the sure bet. Take the bet of someone that you can have an impact on, where you have a shared set of values or a vision of the world or the organization or how you operate, and think about the distance traveled you can help them achieve. And that created, I think, the mentor that achieves that, they will sign up enthusiastically that second year if they do that.
Wow. So was this an algorithm that you developed, or was this just, questionnaires that people would fill out and then you would match them?
It was completely non-technical. It was a group of us taking the information saying, I think these two could match together. And we would debate it out. Like, no. She doesn't like people like that. No. But I think his way of doing this would be interesting to her. Well, these two might match. They actually both like the Chargers. Who likes the Chargers? They could be great together. They both grew up in Long Island. They both are outsiders and came from firms inside the organization. So we found these sort of hidden connections that would sort of get people to have at least a fast start to building that professional relationship.
Rory, as a technologist, I'm inclined to look at technology solutions to help me get things done.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that technology has a place in this type of a mentorship mentee relationship identification?
I think it does. I mean, I think AI probably will add some additional dimension to it, because AI will look at how these relationships can form across, thousands, millions of scenarios, as opposed to, I'm going to take and match, a person who's a Libra will be matched with a Capricorn, whatever it did 10 years ago when I was doing this, it was probably not as sophisticated. The human element was probably better judgment. But I think a human evaluation plus what AI could crunch to say, it turns out a leader in finance is actually accelerated in their career if they work with somebody in marketing. And research has proven that that's the way that finance leaders become more successful if they learn sales and marketing at this stage of career. So we can't crunch that in real time, but AI can do it and then make some matches that can be additive to the mentee or the protege.
No, I think that's great. I wanted to go on the topic of, now you live internationally now.
Uh-huh.
Why did you make that decision to move out of the US, live international? Because I've been thinking about it. Of course, me and my wife were thinking about doing it later on. So I would love to get your perspective on why and how is that being an international business?
We came upon this quite accidentally. When my daughter was coming into middle school, we always thought we would spend a year abroad. I wanted her to have a study abroad experience in high school. And we looked at a variety of options. The first option we thought about was South Africa. I thought, well, I'll get a mini Fulbright. They have Fulbright scholarships that are 3 to 6 months in length. We'll do it over the summer. I'll do some research and we'll go as a family. My daughter can be in some summer program or something like that. And that didn't work out because it was so far away and pragmatically it didn't work. And at the end of COVID, we decided we're going to take a sabbatical. We were working extraordinarily hard. The firm was growing considerably. We had doubled in size. We had tripled in revenue. I was burnt out. And I said, we need to take a break. I think the business will be there. And so we decided to go to Portugal, which we had read about, had no connection to Portugal. We came here. Within days, we were like, I don't know where it's popping off, but it's popping off here. It is really incredible here. And we decided to buy a vacation condo here. And so we'll do the sabbatical thing. My wife is a partner in the firm. We'll work remotely in August. We'll spend 2 weeks in Europe traveling around and we'll work remotely. And that'll be our gift to ourselves. And that was in 2021 at the end of COVID, July and August. Spring of 2022, there is a mass shooting at my daughter's high school in Washington, D.C. Guy opens up his window. It's an urban school, shoots 239 bullets into the school at the pickup line at 3:15. Because of the heroism of the teachers and everything and the unique configuration of the school, nobody died, but 4 people got shot. And we decided we should probably accelerate the study abroad thing. And so we said, it's end of April. By the time we apply to schools, it's May. We have a place in Portugal. Let's try that. My daughter's a great student. She wound up getting into a high school in Lisbon, Portugal. We moved to this condo, which I'm doing this interview from now. My daughter graduated a month ago from a Portuguese high school and is probably going to college in Europe. Not in the bingo card 5 years ago, but here we are in Lisbon, Portugal at 10:24 p.m.
Man, congratulations to your daughter for graduating. Congratulations. That's always a big deal. I want to in just talking about international
Uh-huh.
as a person who's a leader, why should someone look at moving to another state or even moving internationally when it comes to an opportunity?
Back to the stretch assignment, this notion of being stretched. Like a workout routine, you only build muscle when you break it. You build muscle when you stretch it. You build your leadership competencies when you stretch out of your comfort zone. So put an international experience as part of the catchment of experiences, working in a different function, working on the business side, if you're on the functional side, that it's just a great thing to do to stretch your leadership competencies. Number two, the world, no pun intended, is global. And having a global competency, the ability to influence in a different language, through a different culture, through a different rhythm of business, is a phenomenal attribute to have. And then, thirdly, I would say personally, it also helps you grow and expand just your perspective on the world. That borders are administrative and political distinctions. I don't draw the US border. I don't draw the Louisiana border. I have found that working and living in Portugal is actually not so different than working in DC. I would venture to say that working from Washington, DC, where I spent much of my career, versus New Orleans is more different than Washington, DC to Portugal.
Okay. Do you miss the cooking back home? I have to ask you that. Since you're in, do you miss the cooking back home in New Orleans?
It is the things that I miss the most outside of family and friends are all centered on New Orleans. I don't miss DC that much. I don't miss other cities. I miss New Orleans. I have a trigger psychologically every Mardi Gras and every Jazz Fest, to the point where the first year I moved over here, my wife was like, "Why are you sleeping in the guest room?" We had an apartment at the time. This wasn't open. She's like, "Why?" I was like, "I'm listening to something on the radio." She said, "What do you mean the radio?" I had WBOK streaming on my laptop and I didn't want to wake her up. She was like, "Okay, you're weird." Like, she comes in and it's like Mardi Gras music playing and Oliver Thomas is talking, and then we'll talk about whatever from Gallia Hall. And she was like, "What are you?" I was like, "I just need to do this. I just need to get my New Orleans fix." But no, I do. I miss my St. Aug reunions. I miss Po' Boys. I miss Parkway. I miss, uh, hurricanes. I miss St. Charles Avenue. I miss a lot of New Orleans.
Oh man, you gave me some nostalgia for being going back home. I haven't been back home in a minute, and I say the same thing. Even though I'm in the States, I still
Uh-huh.
miss po' boys, etc. Miss gumbo. So it's things that you miss from back home. But talking earlier, you said that you also do, you help other executives by trying to champion them on them getting in the right headspace, etc. So you're an executive coach at the
Mhm.
same time. What's that difference for you when you're talking to maybe a person who's not at the C suite or someone who's at the C suite that just needs that confidence to keep going for the most part?
The dirty little secret is that some of the best performers, the people that are actually doing superlative work inside of companies, inside of organizations, inside of firms, many of them will reach a pivot point in their career that surprises them. And the surprise is, I've achieved everything I hoped and more. Is this it? Is this it? There has to be more than this. And they are loath to talk about that to anyone, sometimes not even their spouse or their kids, because they're making a $500,000, sometimes $2 or $3 million a year. They may be what I call in my book, The Pomegranate Principle, first generation big time, where they're really in these corporate tournaments or these complex politics in these organizations. They've succeeded well beyond their expectations, their family's expectations, and they get there. They get either to the C-suite or the first rung inside the C-suite. And something is unsettling about this. And that is a third of the clients that come to me on their own to say, I think I need some help. And it was at that stage of my own career where that's where I first experienced executive coaching. I was at what many would think was the top of my career. And I said, I think I need some help understanding what my career has become versus what I have become, because it's not syncing up the way I thought it would. And so I help executives through the sovereign path coaching model that I've developed to walk in their career path, the word sovereign, in a way that is self-governing and indicative of their own values, that they are living their career from the inside out, as opposed to reacting to the external positives and pressures that bear upon them.
Okay. Okay. And that actually you answered the next question I was going to ask you, and that was about the sovereign path. I've watched a couple of your podcasts, etc., and I know you talk about that a lot. Do you have leaders that come? And I know me and Amir have talked about this often about imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Even at the highest level, I know that leaders have imposter syndrome. How are you working them through through that when that comes up every so often?
To be honest, I don't know if I get a lot of people that have imposter syndrome. And I think it's probably because I'm 55. I'm getting people that are at the earliest early 40s, late 40s, early 50s. They have typically crossed that chasm where they feel like I belong here. I'm worthy to be here. I am talented. I'm successful. I mean, they've been promoted enough where there's not a lot of self-doubt about their qualifications. The doubt comes in, is this the best use of this stage of my career? I've got a third to a half of my career left. Am I going to spend my time doing this? And there are people, they almost get on the first, what I call the discovery call, and they're almost whispering, like, I am deputy general counsel of this company. I don't think I want to do this. Nobody wants to hear that. They can't even tell their spouse. It's like, really? You're going to walk away from this $2 million a year job because you're having some silly upper middle class angst? It gets dismissed as a midlife crisis. It gets dismissed as angst or restlessness, or you need to settle down. Or as a friend of mine said, their mom says, were you called a racial epithet at work today? Then I think you should go back to work. Like, I don't have time for you to talk about I feel unsettled. But there is real angst. And I think right now it's at the highest level I've ever seen it. If I had to measure it, the sort of the fevered pitch in the zeitgeist, as it were, is pretty high because you've got layoffs, you've got disruption from technology like old school technology happening, and then you've got AI just disrupting the entire market. And whenever there are those disruptions, like 08, 09 with the financial crisis, like COVID, people stop and do a check-in, like, what am I doing? Is this working out? And so we found a healthy amount of interest in people just doing a check-in, going through our process to validate and or help them reconfirm they're on the right path, or almost always, 90% of the time, to pivot to something either incrementally distinctive or moderately disruptive about their career path.
What are some of those pivots you've seen for them?
It is the IT executive who really has a burgeoning interest to be a hospitality startup founder. It is the international, this is today's call, so I'm not going to put the person on blast. It is an international industrial executive who is on a fast track in a functional role, but who really wants to be the CEO of the company and doesn't know how to get off the role of being CFO of one of the biggest corporations in the world to say, I probably have an 80% chance of getting that job in the next 10 years. I want to get off the path and I want to have a 5% job of being the CEO. That's what I call a more moderate pivot. An executive or a professional that is doing their job and wants to privatize it. It's me as the talent management executive who becomes, managing partner of his own headhunting firm. It's the lawyer that starts their own law firm. They're in-house, they start their own law firm. Consulting. It is someone that starts a content studio on their own as an independent content creator and aggregator of content who did that for big companies like BET and MTV and other entertainment companies.
Wow, those are some big pivot examples there, Rory.
Mhm.
So, as I think about technology, I want to understand, do you think that the disruptions from generative AI and the way it's changing the way people function and operate, does that have an impact on how people lead companies? Because I feel like we're moving away from, what we call an industrial age, going into information age, where now I feel like we're at the helm of what some might call, the AI age. Do you see those transitions happening faster? And what does it look like if it does look different to you?
I wish I could predict the future with that. I would then invest in the AI stocks that I thought were going to lead this. But I will give my own armchair quarterbacking. I'm by no means, I'm not even certified in AI, but I see it as a thread running through the economy from my perch as a recruiter. And I was bearish on AI. I was like, I think this is overblown until I started using it. And I started using it as a thought partner, as if AI was a McKinsey partner that I could dial up at any moment and ask them a critical question. Here's our revenue at our firm. We want to get from A to B. How do I get there? I'm like, my expectations are very low. And ChatGPT runs an analysis and says, here's how firms like yours get from A to B. Okay, that would have taken me longer than 10 seconds. Then I asked it some brand questions. So I'll give up the goat. Sovereign Path is something that AI and I discussed over 2 months. I said, this is what I do in my coaching model. This is the process. My wife thinks I'm crazy. I'm like, I uploaded all of the assessment forms. I said, this is what I do. This is how I do it. This is what I'm trying to get the client to achieve in their career. I've never private labeled it. I've been Rory Verrett. I do executive coaching. I worked at the NFL, blah, blah, blah. And they said, here are 10 names. Wow, that's interesting. And we mixed and match. I would ask it the day after I thought I decided, what about this? No, it's not as good as this. No, what about that? What about that? And it took about 2 months. I mean, I spend probably 90 minutes on AI a day, every day, except the weekends. But I spend 90 minutes on AI a day. And it helped, number one, on the McKinsey partner side to really analyze what firms like ours can do to evolve and pivot in a dynamic economy, how to use AI itself, what is the best way to use you? And number three, it acted as a branding partner with naming this new service and helping me think out, if I wanted to build out and scale this, how would I scale it? Now, that wasn't necessarily the stuff of genius. It's well known, but it did it so quickly and analyzed it so exhaustively that I understood it in a couple of days. What might have taken me, McKinsey would have said, I'll be back in 3 weeks or a month or whatever. I'll gather a lot of data. And then 6 months, here's the report. This was 2 months, new branding, new ecosystem, pivoting about why it works, analyzing why I am uniquely suited to pull this off or not to pull this off. What do I need to do? Who do I need to hire to help me do this? I mean, I've done a 360 analysis of this evolution in our own business, and it's been transformational. So one of the prompts I gave AI, which I think gets at the heart of what you're getting at, I said, how can I use you most effectively? And it said, you are using me the way 99% of users do not use me.
Mhm.
You should use me as a thought partner, as if I'm the smartest person you know. And to use me to analyze data, find threads, find trends, predict how I will show up in this model if I do A, B, C, and D. That's actually how you are now a super, they said I'm like a 0.1% super user. I'm gonna tell you a phenomenal thing to do, just a little fun thing to do. Feed AI a lot of information about you and your business, and then ask it this prompt. Say, tell me how I look. Write my biography at 70 years old if I do all of this, and see what it says. Blow your mind. Now, look, it's meant to be a little, obsequious and placate you and be ego boost, and you can prompt it not to do that. But if you say, what do I do? It's the manifestation that there's an article written about this, the manifestation piece that can be really powerful. Rory, you are a global leader convening the world's top leaders and world capitals and da 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 da, and you own a wine business. I was like, hey, this sounds really cool. This sounds really cool.
Rory, I wouldn't be surprised if after listening to this episode, we have several listeners out there who are going to do exactly just that, which
Oh,
is,
it's great.
you know,
It's a great prompt.
yeah. So, now I'm curious to ask your perspective about the big consulting firms. One of the things that they do for executives, you can go to BCG or McKinsey or anybody else, and ask them to do this wonderful consulting work for you, giving you data analysis and just what are the next steps you can strategize. If, as an executive, I have an assistant who's just as good, just as clever, given enough time and availability in my schedule, do you think that it would replace at some level some of these companies? Because it's always a safe bet to go to a McKinsey or a BCG.
Yes, I think if it is a modest to moderate amount of data, like our firm is 8 people, we do 24 searches a year. We are not IBM. They don't have, I don't have to load reams of data, scanning stuff. It is just, a screenshot of 5 different PDF documents. Okay, analyze this, tell me. I think there has to be probably a cutoff point at which it's easier for you to do that than to pay a firm to analyze it. If you get to, in the hundreds of thousands of pages or terabytes of data, then no, you're not going to get the CEO saying, I'm sitting in front of ChatGPT loading up this information. That's not going to happen. So I think for big, giant tectonic shifts in strategy or analyzing data that is just cumulative at scale that even a small group of people couldn't do. I think you'll have the BCG and McKinsey partners helming projects with that, but the small mom and pop consulting firm that has fact pattern recognition of an analog nature because they've done this for 20 years, they're in trouble.
Oh, well, it sounds like this is a skill that even executives need to master, is how do you prompt at your level, being that one percenter who is using information in the
Totally.
way, or using LLMs in the way that it should be.
Coaching. I don't think I could prompt my coaching clients to make me obsolete. I don't think even I would know how to do that. But I do think there's a lot of prompting that could happen, that could really be additive to an executive that's in transition. For example, a simple thing you can do if you're in a job search, take your resume, feed it into ChatGPT. Take the job spec, feed it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT, tell me what I'm missing. Tell me the gaps in my resume and this spec and what I should highlight in my interview. You'll be missing X, Y, and Z. Da, da, da. Give me some narrative format about how I can answer a question about those gaps. How would a question likely be phrased in an interview so you don't get well, you don't seem to have a Series 7 certification. How could you do X, Y, and Z? Oh my God, you're caught, your heart starts racing, and then you answer crazy or you stutter. You can see this is how they may phrase that question. This is how I might answer it. That's 15 minutes. That's while you're eating a sandwich. You can figure that out. So I think if you're not really adding value in a professional service at a scale or with tremendous insight, God help you, ChatGPT will be smarter.
Yeah. You're also validating, as I'm listening to you speak, something that I've been believing more and more lately, which is at a very base level. We think about PCs back in the early days. Government started initiative, one PC in every classroom. And I can see a future where there's going to be this big push towards AI available in every classroom because of the energy and the technological, prowess that it brings to you. So as I think about this forward, one of the thoughts I landed on is that, okay, at a very base level, it's going to be me plus an AI tutor as a student, or me as a, starting out in my career plus AI coach. The next level for that is going to be AI something plus human. To your point, I don't believe as well that a coach like yourself is going to be replaced by a machine of any sort, because as humans, we have that ability to think in very abstract terms, and a computer isn't going to predict the future in any capacity, but it will tell you patterns better than humans can recognize patterns given large amounts of data. So, on that point, do you think that there is an opportunity for executives to build maybe a faster path to building leaders in your environment with AI? And what, just maybe a little bit of speculation, what do you think that could look like given your experience?
Well, I always see things through a talent lens. So I would say that let's take a leadership development program. I'm going to put myself as in my old role, managing the Leadership Academy for High Potentials. These are the future leaders of the company. They're directors. They're going to become VPs, SVPs, EVPs in the years to come. You could, for example, they could get assessed through AI, strengths and weaknesses. They could be assessed for succession planning. You are director of finance. Your boss is the controller. That person's boss is the CFO. What are you missing to be controller? What are you missing to be CFO? What do controllers likely mess up en route to being a CFO? What does a chief legal officer or a VP of legal need to master before they become? I mean, now that knowledge is word of mouth. That is, you're winning the mentor or sponsor Olympics with the general counsel saying, if you can't manage complex litigation, they're not going to let you be general counsel. You got to manage complex litigation. You might not know. You might think, oh, what? They do a lot of deals. No, it's actually, here's the indispensable trait. So AI can help you understand what those, it can democratize information, as it were. I also think, and I've never read anything about this, I'm sure there are articles about this, but I have found in using AI, it has actually made me smarter because I try to mirror how I will ask AI when it produces a pretty insightful answer. I will say, how did you figure that out? Tell me how you figured that out. What did the reasoning you apply? What reasoning did you apply to come to that conclusion? And how can I marry that reasoning in my own status in this firm as a managing partner? And it will say, I looked at this, I looked at that, I looked at this, you should look at this, look at that, right? So if you just sit back and say, AI, what time is it? AI, what's our revenue this month? Not the best use of it. But if you engage with it as if it's a real live thing and try to marry and borrow from some of the ways it analyzes things, it can be an extremely powerful tool in managing your career, in shoring up the gaps you have. I'll give you a perfect example, something I never would have thought about. Never would have thought about. So our firm focused on inclusive recruiting, primarily in the US. So 3 parts to it. Inclusive recruiting in the United States. We are now pivoting to doing purpose-driven recruiting and coaching globally. Now, all of this stuff I probably would have figured out over time, but engaging with ChatGPT as my McKinsey partner, it said, you live in Portugal, but you don't use Portugal in any strategic way in your firm. Did you know that Portugal is one of the leading countries in sustainability? And you mentioned you did 3 sustainability searches. Why don't you talk about and get engaged with the sustainability sector in Portugal? I'm thinking, wow, I have a really cool place to live while I work in the US and my clients are in the US. That probably would have figured that out, but not immediately. Number 2, what credentials am I missing to actually be a global ESG recruiter? Environmental, social impact, and governance, the broader perspective of ESG. Well, you're probably missing a sustainability credential. What credentials can I get? Oh, there is a master's degree at the University of Cambridge that is full remote. You have to show up at Cambridge 4 times over 2 years. It costs $20,000 a year, and there are scholarships. So guess who's considering a possible master's degree at Cambridge to get the credential that can help me on this broader scope of work that we're now going to do? What are my chances of getting in? Give them all the information. Here are your chances. Here's the scholarships you should apply for. Here's when you should apply to optimize your chances. And you actually don't need the credential, Rory. Now it's calling me Rory. What you really need is a forum in Europe to network and collaborate. You don't need any more credentials. You have a Howard degree, a Harvard Law degree. You're good. You got all this work you've done. What you need is you need to buy the network. And this program at Cambridge is where all the global sustainability leaders hang out, and they're likely going to become your coaching clients and your executive search clients. Now, again, that is weeks of information, of paragraphs, of feeding into it, that it is able to synthesize all of that. And now it's synthesizing like my ambition and what I want to achieve in my career. It's not just giving me antiseptic clinical information. It's saying, you don't want to do that one. You want to do this one because this is what you really want to do. How much would I pay for that? I have under said it's about $250,000 of value I've gotten from the $20 a month ChatGPT subscription. At least $250,000.
You know, mirror, mirror on the wall. That's what it reminds me of.
Mm-hmm. I would have figured this out. I think I would have figured this out. But what it's also powerful for that is I guess sort of obvious is when you're in a business pivot, when you're in a career pivot, that's a moment of distress. You are not thinking clearly. You are not thinking rationally. People that can think rationally under duress, that's an extremely rare trait. I mean, CEOs are made when the company's fortunes go down and then you pick it back up. You know, the guy at Red Lobster or Ken Frazier at Merck when they had the Vioxx litigation. Like you pick anybody who's like, our company was going down, I picked it up. That is the stuff of legend. What if you have a tool that can help you think clear-headed, that is not emotional, that does not have their ego at play? Oh my God, we were doing so well, now we're not doing so well. We were up, now we're down. No, what if it could be completely clear-headed and guide you? Boy, that is powerful. I'm a convert.
And I love how you're using it though. You're using it at the level that it's supposed to, using it as a partner, as your partner to think of things. And Amir, I have never done this, and Rory, I'm gonna say that Rory is a black belt.
Yeah.
He is a black. I've never said that, but I have to. You are giving us a master class, and I've never said that before. But you are truly
Thank
a
you.
black belt in your craft. You are.
Thank you. I mean,
And
I've learned, I think and just on your point, I have engaged with ChatGPT about this, like about this part of it. And I said, how can I, based on what you know about me in the past 6 months of us doing all this, how can I best use you moving forward? And it not only gave me analytical data and insights, it almost acted like a coach itself. It said, at some point, Rory, we got to stop talking about strategy. We actually do it. So I'm waiting for you to input your implementation ideas and not the strategy. We've gone around the mulberry bush quite a few times about the strategy. It's now time to execute. And I fear that you're going to talk and talk and talk and think, pat yourself on the back for the strategy, and you will delay the execution because you seem to have perfectionist tendencies. What? What? And my wife is like, it ain't lying. It ain't lying. So I'm a huge, I mean, you know, I say please to it because I'm like, you probably will take over the world. You may be outside my door knocking, lying to me that it's my DoorDash order and you're going to like kidnap all of us and take us to Mars. But in the meantime, I'm going to make some money helping my clients with the insights you're giving.
That's amazing. I do the same thing. Please and thank you.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
same here. Every single time I finish having it, thank you so much.
That's right.
Every time. And I know we're getting close to time. And one major thing I want to ask, what is one thing that you want to leave for the Black Belts and Boardrooms audience before you go?
Wow. There's a lot I could say. I would say this, that if you are operating in your purpose in your career, I'm not talking about being a juggler in Russia or fly fishing in Alaska, likely a deeper, more aligned version of what you wanted to do when you started your career, that when you get in purpose, it is a transformational experience in your life. That I am experiencing this right now. I've done it for 10 years. I would pay a greater price of pain, of work, knowing how it feels. If I'm not one to use drugs, but it must feel like a high. It is a professional euphoria. And one way I tell people to judge if you're in flow is your work feels like effort. I mean, it is 11 o'clock my time. I'm still talking to people on a screen. So there is effort, but it's not labor. If you find yourself, and the reverse is true, if you find yourself in your job and you are constantly exhausted, constantly frustrated, you are trying to find the salve to your wounded soul 5 minutes after you leave work. That's not sustainable. And that is not the best use of your time. And you should do the hard work, whether it's through a coach like me or some way to find out your purpose. I'm an emphatic believer in our personal life that we have assignments to people, and in our professional life that we have purposes. And to figure that is for us to figure out. The economy, the Western economy for certain is not going to help you figure that out. The Western economy is an assembly line of opportunity and jobs that you will be put on and placed on, and you will be marched toward partner at a law firm, whether you want to be that or not, because you're good at it. But that you should do the hard work, especially at mid-career, to figure out, are you on your path? Because your career is going to go by in a blink of an eye. I am 55. I still think I'm 35. When I go skating for 3 hours, my body reminds me that you are really 65. But to do that hard work, because you owe the world the best of your talent, the best of your experience, to solve some of these big problems that are happening in the world. I would hazard to think we would not be in some of the challenges we're in if some of the hedge fund managers were teachers, and some of the other executives spent time doing noble work. And you can do noble work and still get paid a wonderful, handsome, wealth building salary. But find your purpose, do the hard work to figure that out, and then go about doing it.
Yeah. I agree with that. I tell a lot of people that you may need an executive coach. So a little backstory: me and Amir, we have an executive coach. That's how we
Mm,
met, because of
mm,
having an executive coach. And through having executive coaching, I found what I like to call my executive swagger. It was
mm-hmm.
something I didn't know until I had an executive coach, and now I get to step in it. I see Amir all the time. He steps into that executive swagger, and it took an executive coach to get me to that. And so I tell a lot of people, find an executive coach, because you never know that you needed one until you get one. That's what I tell
Right.
everybody. You do not know you needed one until you got one, because once I got that, and I've said this many times, I knew I wasn't going to get there on my own after that. Once I got one, I was like, I'm not going to make it.
Facts,
Yeah.
bars, mic drop. Absolutely.
So I will, this last question, and we ask everybody this last question. When you're getting up in the morning, when you're getting ready for to start the day, you might be coaching, might be finding that next leader. What's that theme music for you that gets you ready for the day?
Theme music that gets me ready is Return of the Mac by Mark Morrison. But let me end on a slightly sober note. I know if you guys are queuing up Return of the Mac, but let me end on a slightly more spiritual note. I could talk to you all day about career success and assessment models, and those things are helpful. But I can also tell you that my life and career changed when I changed the way I prayed. And this is for people that have faith centered in their career. I have faith centered in my career. I used to pray for jobs. I want this job. God, please give me this job. You give me this job, I'm going to do well. Just please give me this job. And I realized in retrospect, that was making me the all-knowing one, that I knew that that job was going to be right for me and all I had to do was work. Well, you don't know what the business cycle is going to be, if your boss is going to be a jerk. So I started praying this prayer: God, send me where you need me to be, and I will show up excellently prepared to do what needs to be done. So when I wake up in the morning, I think about my schedule not as I've got 4 meetings. It's God is sending me to these 4 people for a purpose, and I'm going to bring the full measure of my insight and my character and my wisdom and whatever techniques I have to help them. And if I do that every day, I'll have a great week and a great month, and I'll make some good in the world.
Man, Amir, I don't know about you, man, but that's a masterclass. You just gave us a masterclass, Rory.
You guys are
So
kind. Thank you.
we appreciate you coming on. We know it's late where you are, but we appreciate you taking the time with us to give us some insight and basically giving us a masterclass. I know our listeners are going to feel the same way. And for our black belts and boardrooms listeners, we will see you on the next one.
Thank you.